Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in tonight. Hey, and you know the drill. Don't forget to follow us on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. We have got a great show lined up for you tonight. But before I do that, just a reminder, this is a weekly broadcast, non-politically correct, just a Welshman ranting about all things politics. And tonight we have a very special focus, because you might have noticed over the last couple of weeks, a new news channel that is due to launch in the spring, fronted by the big man himself, Mr. Andrew Neil. And it is, of course, GB News. Yet, even before it is launched and broadcasted a single minute on air, it's already been under attack from papers such as The Guardian. Well, you'd expect that from them anyway, wouldn't you? And of course, people like good old little Femi. He likes to get his stuff off on social media, doesn't he? And in fact, the Daily Mail reported like this: Andrew Neil hits out against woke warriors trying to cancel new GB news station before it even launches, as they take to Twitter to encourage boycotting advertisers. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with my guest, who I'm going to introduce you a bit later. But you know what I'm going to do is going to help you. I'm going to play you a short little clip that'll give you an idea of what we're going to be discussing tonight. So check this out. I'll be right back.
Like I said, BBC News's explicit stated objective is to produce neutral and apolitical reporting, but increasingly people on both sides of the aisle have called this into question. It's almost ironic that some on the left regularly accuse the BBC of pandering to the government and regurgitating the government's agenda, while commentators on the right have nicknamed it the Brexit bashing corporation, based on their belief that the BBC is against the right and specifically against Brexit. Now, this isn't the video for us to talk about where the BBC lands on the political spectrum, or if they succeed in their neutral objectives. Maybe we'll do that in another video, but now's not the time. Ultimately, it doesn't even really matter. Even if we were all to agree that the BBC falls dead in the middle when it comes to their reporting, the perception from many on both sides is that they favour the other. This has led to some, especially on the right, looking across the Atlantic and growing jealous of the news coverage in America. And when there's demand like that, you know that someone's going to step in and try and fill it. In fact, there's two groups. Let's start with GB News. GB News is a news channel set to launch this spring, having secured £60 million worth of funding and approval from Ofcom. Like their soon-to-be rival, their objective is to cater to the right, a group they perceive as being underserved and forgotten by mainstream TV news. Once they launch, they're planning to broadcast on TV 24 hours a day, with a real focus on conservative opinions and personalities. The project first got a lot of press when they managed to sign Andrew Neil as their chairman and star presenter. Neil, formerly of the BBC and chairman of The Spectator, is a huge media heavyweight and a major catch for the network.
So there you go, folks. That's really what we're going to be discussing tonight with my guest. And she is someone that I've admired for a long time, especially the work she did with the Brexit Party as the former MEP as she is now. And she, of course, she's one of the presenters on Unlocked. Fantastic show, by the way, here on social media and Facebook and everything else. You need to check those guys out. Her name, well, in fact, listen, before I mention who it is, let's just watch her in action, shall we?
Let me make this very clear, Mr. Sassoli. You have no right to go and speak with the UK Speaker, having conversations that are directly interfering into our domestic politics. It exposes your intentions to intervene at all levels to stop Brexit. It is immoral. Shame on you.
Well, welcome Belinda De Lucy to Rich Politics. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I am so excited to have you on.
Well, it's very kind of you. Thank you very much for having me. Gosh, that's
the
whole world away.
I know. And you're not afraid to say what you think, and that's what I like about having guests on Rich Politics, is people who are passionate, because passion is one of my gifts, I think, as a Welshman. But certainly with you, you weren't afraid to tell them in Brussels exactly what you thought, were you?
No, the problem is I'm quite a wimp when it comes to conflict social. But when there is a real injustice, when something was so plain in sight, like the Brexit vote being overturned, and the sort of the trickery and knavery that was going on to try and overturn it, really, I mean, it got me so angry. It was millions of votes being overturned by very privileged, wealthy people with powerful platforms, and I couldn't bear it, to be honest. I couldn't bear it, so I dropped everything and started protesting, and then luckily got elected as an MEP and had to give Sassoli and the rest of the presidents, so many EU presidents, a piece of my mind on behalf of the British people.
And we are grateful and thankful to you for doing such a thing. We really are. Thank you so much, Belinda. Well, we're not talking about Brexit, funnily enough, today, which, we've talked a lot about before. I certainly have anyway. I want to talk about the launch of GB News here in the UK. Now, we've got an overcrowded, some would say, media right now in MSM, mainstream media, with the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. And some would say they've been politicised over the years. BBC was meant to be neutral, impartial. But of course, those on the left would argue they're a propaganda machine for the government, for right-wing ideologies. And those on the right would say they're left-wing. And so we have this battle. But the truth is, we wouldn't be really British if we didn't complain about something. So we always complain about the media. We shout at the TV screen, that's why do they let him on? Why do they let her on? It's one of those things. But I wonder right now, coming up this spring, of course, the news of this new channel and Andrew Neil fronting it. And I gather they've got some new presenters. Like Colin Brazier is coming on. I think there's quite a few that they're fishing for at the moment. Do you think there's a place for this news channel?
I do. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that we've had to go down this path of providing a news station that reflects, a different point of view, because the BBC was great pre-Brexit. So sort of when I was growing up in the 90s, the BBC did feel very much a national treasure that was very much trusted for fair, impartial news. And I do think Brexit destroyed the mainstream media. I think they're still suffering from the syndrome, and they felt like they had a control over people, and suddenly we weren't doing as we were being told. And when Brexit happened, I think they panicked and went full turbocharged one way, which was very much alongside the Remain establishment. They even took on the Remain language. Suddenly it was crashing out, and hard Brexit and soft Brexit. This wasn't impartial language at all. It was all a force to kind of, demonize and politicize every single thing. And it destroyed the BBC and the trust people had in the BBC. And it actually had a really detrimental impact on people. People lost friends, found it difficult to get work because BBC, Sky, you name it, took this really anti-Brexit voter stance, and it was all about racism and us being xenophobic, and it had a real impact on people's lives. And I haven't quite forgiven them for that, because I was such a pro-BBC well beforehand. So I do think there is now a space. I think the BBC and Sky have actually given birth to GB News. If it wasn't for their failure to stay impartial, there would be no gap, there would be no appetite. Yeah,
and I think that to remain impartial, they clearly weren't. That was highlighted through the whole Brexit campaign. I didn't realize it. Like you, I'm old school. I'm only 46. I'm a boy from the 70s. But when I was watching BBC, it was my go-to channel. It was world news. You got everything on there, and you got everyone's opinions, and it was great. But then after Brexit happened, 2016, I noticed a change in the narrative, and even the journalists that were on there, they weren't reporting news. They were just giving their opinions. And I thought, well, I haven't tuned in to listen to your opinion. If I want that, I'll follow you on social media. I don't even want it on my team. And I'm paying for this. I'm paying a license fee, which is a huge thing. Again, of course, then we've had this big move of defund the BBC. And I think the last time I checked, 40% of the population, according to the latest polling was done, said they have no trust in the BBC anymore. And it's a huge jump from where they were over a year ago. And I think the call for defunding the BBC is a very powerful move, not just on social media, because people are waking up to reality that we got presenters and journalists on our mainstream news on big fat salaries, not reporting the news, but rather giving their own opinion.
Absolutely. It's like it's full of political activists now, and they're, the wonderful days of Trevor McDonald. I don't know if you remember.
Yes, I remember Trevor.
It was, and at midnight when the BBC used to play the national anthem before it turned off. These were the days that defined the BBC, and now all of a sudden they're wanting to re-educate us and indoctrinate us, not just with Brexit, but during the US campaign between Biden and Trump, It was so one-sided. It was like they were mouthpieces for Biden. Now, I don't particularly have a lot of time for Trump, but
No.
I do feel I wanted to hear his side. I would have loved to have seen Biden's representatives as rigorously questioned as Trump's representatives, but it's just not the case. They pick favorites. They give people they're politically aligned with such an easy time, even like on Andrew Marr, all these kind of political shows. They go softly with the sort of politicians they like and align with, and then they go hell for leather at the ones that might have dared voted Brexit or slightly right of centre. And it's very sad we've got to this point, but needs must, and necessity dictates that we have to have a balance. The only way we're going to get balance is if we have another news channel.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, before we spoke, I know you've been busy with lockdown. Like myself, I got plenty of kids. You've got 4, I got 5. And I know it's been a challenge for you as well. And so, it's been difficult. And I know the BBC have been putting programs on for children. Some of them programs for me are quite questionable as a parent, certainly. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk a little bit about GB News. Let's get back onto GB News. Rich, talking about GB News. This attack, even before they've broadcasted a single minute, why do you think there is such an attack on them, even before they've even broadcasted a single program?
Well, clearly they're frightened because these I'd say lib lefty on the left centre of politics. They can't win at the ballot box. How long has it been since we've had a real lefty government? Well, Tony Blair wasn't really, what people would consider left.
No.
He was very much a centrist. It's been decades and decades. So they've realised they can't win at the ballot box. They can't persuade people of their arguments. So how do they go about implementing policies in another way? And it's through the media. So for them, control of the media is as important as winning at an election that they fail at. So it's all about, well, let's get our message across and demonize a certain section of society and appraise the other section of society. So I think they're terrified that they're losing that grip because it's the only way they have any power. And I also think they're panicked because something like GB News will actually start picking out stories that, for example, would show the benefits of right-wing politics, or actually not even right-wing, common sense. Common sense, on very controversial topics. Now, if you go through things like illegal immigration, grooming gangs, you name it, you've got certain controversial topics that just won't get discussed as vigorously on BBC as it might do on GB News. Just want fairness, and I'm really interested to hear the other side. So they're terrified of us hearing the other side. So
it's interesting. They haven't even broadcast a show yet, and they're already being boycotted, online, especially on Twitter. People like Femi, who is trying to boycott them and hashtagging "Don't Fund GB News," the hashtag that was going round, and claiming that it'll be like Fox News. All these claims, and yet we've all heard and seen Andrew Neil over the years. We know he's a fair journalist. Every time I've watched him, he's been critical of the left and the right, in my opinion, and I think the attack on them is unwarranted because, as you've pointed out, Belinda, they're afraid, aren't they? They're afraid of an alternative message or narrative that's different from theirs. And these are people who say defund hate, but they use hate against someone else that doesn't agree with what they say to try and get their own way. I mean, the whole thing is bonkers, isn't it?
It is. They're all about ring fencing people so they're above criticism. So, the people that feel like BBC reflects their views and they want to keep control of that have ring fenced certain groups of people. So you can't criticize them. You just had recently Emma Barnett on Women's Hour. She was interviewing the female head of the Muslim Council of Britain and asked a simple question: how many female imams are there in the UK? Now, the lady who's being interviewed didn't answer. And so Emma just pushed gently and asked a couple more times, yes, but can you please tell me how many imams? She still wouldn't answer. Now, what happened next was fascinating. The Guardian wrote an article, this is Islamophobia at its worst. This is just to encourage Muslim bashing. And I'm thinking, hang on, this was a very similar conversation that we had on the Protestant and Catholic Church about female bishops. There's nothing wrong asking this question. What did the BBC do? They removed the Women's Hour clip from their social media. So, and this is the problem, and this was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And this can't happen. This is making it entirely political, and also ring-fencing groups of people who apparently aren't allowed to be questioned like others are, and that's not healthy for anyone.
No. Yeah, and I think, look, ultimately, we don't want to see censorship, do we? You know, that's the problem.
And Andrew Neil interviewed me 3 times. I was terrified. I was shaking one of the one-on-one interviews, I remember seeing Chuka Amoon coming out of the interview room like a nervous wreck, having been interviewed by Andrew Neil, and I was next, and he grilled me. You know, he really went for me in a very professional, fair way, and didn't you know, give me a light touch because I was Brexit. I don't even know his opinion on Brexit, but that's why people are frightened, is because Andrew Neil goes for both sides equally, and that's why he's such a threat to the left.
Yes, yeah. Do you think that GB News will be subject to future attacks?
Definitely. Any slip up at all that they make will be all over the Guardian in minutes. But then it's just more promotion. And the silly thing is the more they attack GB News, the more exposure they get, the more people get to hear about GB News. And it's almost like a badge of honor. If the Guardian are attacking it, it will inspire people to watch it.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to watching it. I don't know about the rest of our viewers, because it's nice to have an alternative from all the usual crap that we normally have, because I'm fed up of it, to be honest with you. The amount of people that tell me, you know, Rich, I can't watch BBC anymore. I can't watch this. I can't watch that. I think the closest they got to any impartiality was Sky News, but then that started to change with different journalists. You know, it kind of slipped from being centre to the left. So I'm looking forward to it. All power to Andrew Neil and GB News and all those involved in it. And I hope to see you on there, Belinda.
Well, maybe. I'm sort of politically irrelevant at the moment. And that gives me great pleasure, because the whole point was that, you know, Brexit was done in some form.
Yeah.
This is the best form we were ever going to get from a, you know, Conservative government that was split. So I'm kind of gratefully politically irrelevant now until next time there's an injustice, and then I've got everyone back.
Well, listen, that's why I'm going to bring the end of the interview to ask you, what is next for Belinda De Lucy? I love your name, by the way. It's really like Belinda De Lucy, you know, it's like almost Italian, isn't it? I just love it. I just say that. Sorry to our viewers, just having a moment.
Yeah.
What's next for Belinda?
Well, I've got 4 kids in secondary school, and you know, they may or may not go on to university. The biggest thing I'm worried about is how our academic institutions are being strangled by left-wing political indoctrination and free speech. And this whole wokeism people think is just on Twitter. It isn't. It's actually quite dangerous and starting to infiltrate into schools and universities, where children are now terrified of putting their hand up and you know, saying, well, I actually think a couple of policies that Trump put in place were good. I mean, my children have been in a situation where they get totally shouted down for even bringing up things like that. So I think the only way we can defeat wokeism, if you like, is to have the courage to be disliked, and to teach our children to stand up and take the hate and the arrows and be brave enough to stiffen their spine, because it then stiffens other spines to join in, because we can't have a generation being churned out by this lot. I mean, they're going to end up governing us one day, and we really need to protect free speech as much as democracy. So if there's any area I'll go into, it'll be that one.
Well, I don't think it's the end of Belinda De Lucy's political career then, listening to you there. But Belinda, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best for the future, and hope to get you back on the show another time.
Such a pleasure. Lovely to see you, Rich. All the best.
God bless. Bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the show tonight with my guest, Belinda De Lucy. I've loved having her on. I hope she can come back on again. And I'm really looking forward to the launch of GB News. I don't care what Femi thinks. I don't care what the left think. I'm looking forward to it, and so are millions and millions of others as well. So make sure you tune in when it's broadcast. And I'll catch you on another episode of Rich Politics, same time, same place. Well, it's not same time, same place. It's every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. You should know that. Catch you next week on Rich Politics.